To crochet in rows, all you need is a hook and yarn. So let's start off by making a foundation chain. And to make a foundation chain, we first need to make a slip knot. So take your yarn and lay it out like a line where the cutoff piece of yarn is on the right. Pick up that cutoff piece of yarn and loop it once around the rest of the yarn. Now pick up the right side of that loop and flip it over the rest of the yarn like the page of a book. So the rest of the yarn is somewhere in the middle of this loop. Now pick up the middle of that loop and then pick up the cutoff piece of yarn with your other hand and pull that cutoff piece of yarn until a knot forms. This is called a slip knot. Then stick your hook into this loop that you just made, and you want to stick it in the way that when you pull on the yarn connected to the yarn ball, the yarn that moves is the yarn that is closer to you, the one that is on top of the hook. And you want to keep on pulling this yarn connected to the yarn ball until the knot that you just made is pretty much right up against the hook. And since you're left-handed, you also want this knot to be on the right side of your hook. Now let's get into crocheting position. Wrap the yarn around your yarn hand like you normally would. So, as a quick recap, hold your piece and the hook in front of your right palm facing you. Wrap the yarn once around your pinky so the piece is now behind your hand. And then drape the piece or the working yarn over your index finger and hold on to the knot you just made with your thumb and middle finger. So now we're going to do some chain stitches. We're gonna do 9 of them in this video, but do however many chain stitches, abbreviated CH, that your pattern says. So with the hook in front of the working yarn, tip of the hook facing you, do a yarn over. Bring the hook below and behind the working yarn, and then bring that yarn through the loop that's on the hook. And you have now made 1 chain stitch. So repeat this 7 more times. Yarn over by bringing the hook below and behind the working yarn. Pull through the yarn that's on your hook. And I'm actually going to readjust my yarn hand now so that my foundation chain doesn't get all twisted. So I'm going to let go with my thumb and middle finger and then hold on to the V I just made with my thumb and middle finger. Now I have more control over everything. All right, I'm going to make a few more chain stitches here. Hook is in front of the working yarn. Do a yarn over. Bring your hook below and behind the working yarn and pull that yarn through the loop on your hook. And every time you pull the loop through, remember to move your hook back over to your yarn hand so you don't accidentally lose the new loop you just made. And after every few stitches, I tend to do it after every 2 stitches or so, I rearrange my grip so that I'm holding on to the V I just made with my thumb and middle finger to give me some more control. Also, I want to stop when I've made 9 chain stitches, so it should look like 9 V's. So here I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay. So while I was crocheting that foundation chain of 9 stitches, it kind of looked like I was making a chain and crocheting upwards. So I was holding on to my chain like this. Now, because I am going to crochet into that chain, I'm going to reorient my chain so that it's more like a horizontal line instead. So here's the tricky thing about crocheting in rows. You need to crochet into this foundation chain. And when you crochet into a foundation chain, you actually only put your hook under the back loop of the chain. So what is a back loop? So every V that you see here is a chain stitch. You want to put your hook only under the side of the V that is further from you. So here. And not only that, you actually want to skip the first chain from the hook. So you want to skip this chain. That's going to be giving your new row some height. So you're actually going to put your hook in the second chain from the hook and only under the back loop of that chain. So it looks like you have 2 loops on your hook. Now you're going to do a single crochet stitch So your hook is in front of your working yarn, tip of the hook facing you. Yarn over by bringing the hook below and behind the working yarn. Pull that yarn through just the hole that the hook went into. So now you have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over again and bring that yarn through both loops on the hook. You have made 1 single crochet stitch. Great. So you're going to do a total of 8 single crochet stitches for this row, even though you started this all by doing 9 chain stitches because we skipped one of those stitches. That's what's giving your row some height. So to see where to put your hook next, you're going to look for the next unworked V. So you can see there's a hole here because that's where you just crocheted into. You've split apart that V. So you need to put your hook under just the back loop of the next V and do a single crochet stitch again. So it looks like you have 2 loops on your hook, hook in front of the working yarn, do a yarn over, pull that yarn through the first loop on your hook. So you've got 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over again and bring that yarn through both loops on the hook. There you've done your second single crochet stitch. And I'm going to meet you at the very end of this row once you've completed all 8 single crochet stitches. I would recommend counting in your head or writing it down as you go if you're new to crocheting so you don't lose track. Because sometimes it can get a little confusing seeing whether or not you actually hit the end of a row. Oftentimes people get confused about the very last stitch placement. All right, so I think I've hit the end of this row. I think I've crocheted into every stitch that I possibly could. And I know that I have if I have made 8 single crochet stitches, so I should see 8 horizontal V's. So if I turn my piece to look at the edge and I look at the yarn that's looped on the hook, it traces back into a V. If I did things correctly, that is V number 8. And then if I just keep going down, I should be able to count all the way back down to 1. So here's V number 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. It's that last one down here. Great. So now I need to do what's called a chain 1 and turn. So as you can see, I've run out of stitches to crochet into, which is why we need to do what is called a chain 1 and turn. We're going to literally flip our piece so that we yet again have more stitches to crochet into. So hold your hook in front of your working yarn, do a yarn over, pull that yarn through the loop on your hook, and now rotate your piece by flipping it like the page of a book. Ta-da! And that was the turn. So now, because we're no longer going to be crocheting into a foundation row, we actually need to put our hook under the entirety of the V, not just the back loop of the V. Also, one thing that can get confusing when you're new to this is being able to see those V's. So you might be looking at your piece and you might think that these 2 strands of yarn are those V's, but they are not. The V's are truly at the edge of your piece. So you need to rotate your piece a bit more to be able to see it. They are these V's. So just like when we did the other row, we want to skip the chain that is immediately next to the hook and put our hook under the second stitch from the hook. And now, because we put our hook under the entire V, it looks like we have 3 stitches. And now, because we put our hook under the entire V, it looks like we have 3 strands of yarn on the hook. But we're going to do a single crochet stitch like normal. So yarn over, pull that yarn through just the hole that the hook just went into. So now you have 2 loops on the hook. Yarn over again, and pull through both loops on the hook. And again, for the next stitch, you're probably going to have to turn your piece so that you can really look at the edge of it and see what horizontal V is now available and has no yarn crossing it so that you know that's where you want to put your hook next. You do another single crochet stitch here. And in case you couldn't tell just from looking where to put your hook next, another way you can tell is by looking at the yarn that the loop on your hook traces back into. It traces back into these 2 loops the one that's closer to your yarn hand goes back into this hole over here. That is the hole that you just crocheted into, which means you want to put your hook into the next hole to the left of that and just directly under that horizontal V. So I'm going to meet you at the end of this row as well, just to show you that when you hit the end again, you're going to repeat what we just did, which was a chain 1 and turn. And when you're new to crocheting in rows, I would recommend counting every time you think you've hit the end of the row to make sure that you actually have the correct number of stitches in that row, because it's super common that you accidentally put more or less stitches in a row and then wind up with a little squiggly rectangle instead of an actual rectangle. All right, I have hit the end of my row though, so I need to do a chain 1 and turn again. So yarn over, pull that yarn through the loop on your hook, and then turn your piece like the page of a book. Now you've executed the turn, and from here on out, you're going to always skip the chain that's immediately next to the hook, and then stick your hook under the second stitch from the hook, under the whole horizontal V, and crochet from there.